common sense occasionally forgets to check in at reception, the taxi drivers rose once again, not merely as plaintiffs, but as living exhibits in a long-running experiment titled, What Happens When Regulation Takes a Coffee Break and the Market Downloads an App? Their case, at its heart, was beautifully simple and painfully complicated. Between 2014 and 2016, the municipality allowed Uber to operate in a space that had, until then, been governed by a dense forest of taxi bylaws, rules about plates, inspections, insurance, tariffs, and enough paperwork to make a photocopier develop self-awareness. The drivers complied. They paid. They waited. They invested, often upwards of $200,000 for a single taxi plate, on the understanding that rules like winter in Canada were not optional. Then suddenly, winter turned into spring, but only for one side of the street. The courtroom listened as the numbers were introduced: 1,186 plates, 667 owners, and a revenue model that once resembled a respectable bond investment: steady, predictable, and quietly profitable. A plate could be leased through the drivers' union at a monthly return that made financial advisors nod approvingly. It was not glamorous wealth, but it was stable. It was, in the Canadian sense of the word, reasonable. And then came disruption, not the poetic kind celebrated in business schools, but the practical kind that empties pockets while filling PowerPoint slides elsewhere. Enter the expert witness, with polished language and the confidence of someone who has never argued with a tow truck driver at dawn. The expert proposed a method: calculate the losses based on the driver's tax declarations. Clean, structured, auditable, almost elegant, and almost entirely detached from reality. Because the taxi industry, as every driver in that room silently testified, does not live inside spreadsheets. It lives on curbsides, in breakdown lanes, in midnight repairs, in cash exchanges conducted under flickering garage lights. When a vehicle fails in the middle of a shift, there is no time for procurement protocols or invoice negotiations. There is only urgency, and a mechanic who may or may not believe in receipts, but certainly believes in immediate payment. Pay now, says reality. Document later, says the system. Good luck with that, replies experience. Expenses in this world are like footprints in fresh snow, visible for a moment, then gone. Repairs, towing, emergency fixes, informal labor, costs accumulate with impressive consistency and equally impressive invisibility. Meanwhile, the driver continues: 10 hours, 12 hours, often 80 hours a week. Two full-time jobs compressed into one exhausted human being, supported by a vehicle that depreciates daily and complains hourly. Fuel is the only honest expense. It shows up everywhere, like an uninvited but well-documented guest. Everything else lives in the gray zone between necessity and paperwork. So when the expert suggested relying on tax filings, the room did not erupt. It simply paused, as if reality itself had stepped outside for air. The driver's response, when it came, was measured but unmistakably sharp. Your Honor, if precision is the goal, then perhaps we should begin with a precise understanding of how this industry actually functions. They pointed not to their own incomplete records, but to the broader estimates used by Canadian statistical bodies. Models that attempt, however imperfectly, to capture the true cost structures of self-employed drivers, including the undocumented, the irregular, and the inconveniently real. After all, justice, much like driving in Ottawa traffic, requires awareness of conditions on the ground, not just what appears on the map. Then came the human arithmetic: 10 years of litigation, $2.2 million spent collectively just to arrive at a courtroom door, a decade of waiting for a decision about a 2-year window that changed everything. And hovering above it all, a quiet but persistent question: if regulation existed, and if it was not applied equally, who absorbs the cost of that selective enforcement? Certainly not the algorithm, certainly not the app, and as history was proving in that room, very often the driver. The closing tone shifted: less argument, more appeal, but still wrapped in that unmistakable layer of dry irony. Your Honor, they said, we are not asking for sympathy. We are asking for calibration. If the measuring tool is flawed, the result will be flawed, no matter how carefully it is applied. They did not deny the need for numbers. They challenged the choice of numbers, because numbers, like stories, depend on what you choose to include and what you quietly leave out. And so the courtroom returned to its natural state: attentive, composed, slightly overwhelmed by the weight of turning lived experience into legal arithmetic. As the session adjourned, one final thought lingered, not dramatic, not loud, but stubbornly present. Is justice a matter of clean data or of accurately understanding a messy world? In Ottawa, as the files closed and the ties loosened ever so slightly, the answer remained pending.